Good afternoon, everybody. This is a live briefing as Tropical Storm Danny is making landfall right now as I am doing this briefing. Looks like it's coming in just to the north of Hilton Head Island. Most of the tropical storm warnings are off to the north of the center, even though all the convection and the precipitation is off on this southern side. And it does look like on satellite that there is a bit of a convective explosion as this thing is making landfall right now, as often happens with these relatively weak tropical storms. Pretty heavy rain from Savannah over to Hilton Head Island as that wraparound is coming around. A little bit of some convergence as well there through the river valley, helping to spice up this convection and as this thing is coming ashore. But the center is right about here. This is where the center of Tropical Storm Danny is, coming in a little bit further south than that forecast track, definitely wobbling a little bit east-southeast. Does look like that could be an eddy within a diffuse but closed center as well. But it does look like this. There are some southwesterlies off to the east of that center as it's coming in. You can see some of these weaker bands as well, bringing onshore flow into locations like Charleston up there. Definitely could get some storm surge, minor surge along the coastline during that high tide cycle. But the big impact here is going to be rainfall along its track. And it does look like my mom, which is located in upstate South Carolina, could get a little bit of rain from this. But overall, looks like a pretty dry system as it's coming in. Some squalls, the worst of the conditions down there from Savannah over to Hilton Head Island. Now let's take a look at the satellite imagery, and we could show the satellite presentation on approach. Gives you an idea of the robustness of this system. Look at all that dry air, and interestingly too, see this eddy on satellite. Beautiful eddy there, a little bit of a vortex, likely had convection around it there. You can see it started off as a supercell here in the eastern side of this tropical storm, and then it lost its convection, too much dry air eroding that supercell, and then you're just left with a bit of an MCV, mesoscale convective vortex there, and that's lifting up toward the Charleston area, so that could bring a little bit of rainfall, maybe some gusty winds with that MCV there that's lifting off to the north. But incredible things that you could see here on satellite, kind of showing that fractal pattern that you get. You often have the main vortex here in the middle, and then you'll get smaller vortices of a smaller scale in the outer bands that can often be supercell storms. I am monitoring the convective potential on this band off to the north, looking at some of the echo tops there to see if we can get some supercell storms up there. But overall, pretty weak tropical cyclone as it's coming in. Hopefully it's not a sign of things to come for the season ahead. Relatively active tropical season is anticipated for the Atlantic, with a year 2 La Nina potentially materializing, which would weaken overall the wind shear across the tropical Atlantic. Also, sea surface temperatures are quite warm in the Gulf of Mexico down into the Caribbean, meaning that any storm that comes into that environment will have the potential to intensify even more rapidly on approach to the Gulf of Mexico. But it is possible that we could have an active Atlantic season and just a bunch of fish storms that recurve along the western edge of the Bermuda High, the western extension of that subtropical high across the northern Gulf of Mexico and into the southeastern U.S. was crucial last year for these tropical storms to make landfall, tropical cyclones to make landfall across the Gulf Coast, including numerous hurricanes, with Hurricane Delta and Hurricane Laura making landfall within about 15 miles apart there in the southwestern coast of Louisiana. I'm actually working on a highlight video of the whole entire season from last year, remembering the 2020 hurricane season. I'm trying to shift away a little bit from chasing tornadoes to getting my brain ready to get damp chasing these hurricanes once again. This one, though, is just a little bit weaker, low end of the spectrum for me to head all the way out there across eastern coastal South Carolina for 45-mile-an-hour winds, maybe some greater gusts there. But there you can see the official NHC track takes the tropical depression near the Augusta area through northern Georgia by Tuesday afternoon into northwestern Georgia as a subtropical low. Not a lot of precipitation on the northern side of this tropical cyclone, so I don't think that my mom is going to get much in the way of big-time rain. But with those Appalachians, with all this tropical moisture heading in that direction, there is definitely a chance. And you can see some special weather statements here for these bands Hazard 40 to 50 mile an hour wind gusts, excessive cloud to ground lightning, strong thunderstorms along the line from Shawnee to near Hardyville to White Marsh Island, nearly stationary storms, torrential rainfall as well. And this is definitely the worst of the conditions here within this convergent band on the south side of that tropical storm, making landfall just to the north of Hilton Head Island there. Mostly offshore flow in Hilton Head itself, so I don't think that the storm surge was too bad there in Hilton Head, but you definitely could get some pretty big time rainfall, some flooding that could impact these areas. That includes Savannah down there with very heavy rain, and it does look like this band is setting up in a semi-permanent fashion there right along the river between South Carolina and Georgia. That's a big mega river there that comes right down the border of South Carolina and Georgia here. But the tropical storm warning, that's off to the north. Potential for winds 39 to 57 miles an hour. Looks like it'll probably be on the lower end of that, especially with the lack of convection on the northern and eastern side of this system. To me, it looks like the worst of the conditions are definitely going to be on the south side of this storm, but there is a chance of a storm surge, potentially up to 2 feet above ground, somewhere within those storm surge prone areas. That does include Charleston as well. In that tropical storm warning, I would say mainly surge is the main issue here. Coastal flooding throughout the yellow area here, central South Carolina coastline, anywhere north of the center that right now is coming in just to the north of Hilton Head Island. Maximum sustained winds of 45 miles an hour with this storm. Minimum pressure about 1,009 millibars, so we did have a stronger surface low with that outflow boundary bust there in northeastern Kansas just recently, but this is in the tropics. Definitely a closed low as well here as it made landfall. Basically made landfall right about now, just to the north of South Carolina, near the Beaufort area there as well. Beaufort, South Carolina, getting pretty close to sampling that minimum pressure there as this storm is coming in. But the worst of the conditions in terms of rainfall, in terms of wind gusts, probably happening just along the south side of this center with that convection, bringing some of that wind, the higher wind gusts down to the surface within these convective elements there. Not seeing much in the way of tornado potential as there's a ton of dry continental air wrapping around this circulation from the south, around that convergent band. A lot of dry air coming into the south side of the circulation, infusing this circulation and causing it to weaken just a little bit. But it was upgraded to Tropical Storm Danny just before making landfall. Maximum sustained winds of 45 miles an hour. And I also want to look at some of the forecast models to see what type of rainfall is anticipated with this system and if there is any flood potential across the southeast, including where my mom lives there in upstate South Carolina. She had Hurricane Zeta come through there and packed quite a punch across upstate South Carolina. A lot of roof damage there, big time winds as well, very fast moving, ejecting tropical cyclone. Hurricane Zeta was upgraded to a Category 3 by the National Hurricane Center post-analysis. So now let's take a look at the forecast models and see what kind of rain we are going to be dealing with this system, Danny, as it lifts off to the northeast. Let's take a look at the 3-kilometer NAM. Does a pretty good job. A higher resolution model does a pretty good job resolving the terrain features there of the southern Appalachians. And boy, look at that. Hardly any rain on the north side of Tropical Storm Danny. Even with the orographic enhancement out here in the southern Appalachians, it does look like some of the higher peaks in the Smoky Mountains right along the Tennessee-North Carolina border could see amounts in excess of an inch. But it looks like the heaviest rain is going to be right where that stationary rain band is on the south side of this Tropical Storm Danny. Could see about 3 to 4 inches of rain in total there. Still no flash flood warnings yet within that band. But it does look like that band could become a little bit more diffuse as it heads toward the Atlanta area. Probably some daytime heating could lead to some intensification of air mass thunderstorms, invigorated by this injection of tropical moisture with Tropical Storm Danny. But overall, impact should be relatively minimal with this system. Certainly could get some storm surge flooding up to 2 feet along and just to the north of that center. That includes the Charleston area, areas up to the north, Myrtle Beach, maybe a little bit of coastal flooding, maybe a 1 foot rise out there with that persistent onshore flow. But it's pretty incredible that just on the north side of the system on how dry it is. Look at how minimal that precipitation is across almost the whole entire state of South Carolina, the exception being down to the far southern corner, near, especially just to the south of Hilton Head Island, right along that river, between South Carolina and Georgia there. But all this dry air coming in along the south side of the system is pretty obvious here as well as it's whipping around the south side. Let's take a look at the NAM and see what it has a similar configuration. 18Z models are resolving this stationary band pretty well here. And there is our tropical system initialized at about 18Z. And you can see a lot of this dry air wrapping all the way around the circulation, keeping the north side relatively rain-free across the entire tropical storm warning area. Look at that dry air getting infused into it as well. And there is a little bit of a tilt to this system as well. The upper levels, that spin is located a little bit southwest of the main tropical storm that right now is already making landfall just to the north of the Hilton Head area, bringing with it some winds gusting 45 to 50 miles an hour, especially within that stationary convective band. And you can see this dry air wrapping all the way around into the circulation, eroding a lot of that precipitation and convection on the northern side of this system. There's the upper level low, displaced a little bit from the low level center, making landfall far southwestern South Carolina. And when you have a tilt of these systems, it means that they're relatively unhealthy. The most healthy tropical cyclones are very vertically oriented. The mid and upper level spin will be co-located with the low level spin, a giant vertically oriented heat engine, if you will, feeding off of the sea surface temperatures there. This did pass over some relatively warm water of the Gulf Stream, but really this tilt, quite a bit of wind shear, some dry air getting entrained into the system, almost making it more of a subtropical low as it comes in, given the tilt from the low-level center up to the mid-levels. Pretty good onshore flow here. A little bit of westerly shear as well that's causing that system to tilt a little bit from the east over to the west. Mainly some westerly shear here, located over the southeast in the deep layer. And tropical systems in general don't like wind shear. And when you have an upper level low that is displaced from the low level center, that usually means that the low level center is also encountering some wind shear here on the north side of that upper level low with that easterly winds. Just a little bit of storm relative shear as this came ashore. But mainly that dry air wrapping completely around the circulation was the big issue. Just a weak tropical storm, pretty standard. Not much tornado potential either. Some of the models here are showing up to 3 inches of rain near the Savannah area and far southeast South Carolina. A couple inches of rain being modeled for the Atlanta area. And the HRRR seems to be depicting the positioning of this band pretty well. The 18Z run. The HRRR has a little bit more rain across upstate South Carolina. Definitely experiencing that orographic lift there. A little bit of tropical moisture. Easterly winds getting forced up the terrain. So I could see 2 to 3 inches of rain potentially falling here in the foothills of upstate South Carolina with this system. Maybe a couple inches of rain in Atlanta, but that convergent band definitely becomes more spotty as this system lifts off to the northwest toward the Atlanta area. There's a marginal risk for severe weather along coastal South Carolina, but really, given all that dry air just completely eroding the convection on the north side of this system, I'm not seeing much of any tornado threat with this system as it comes in. Complete lack of feeder bands out there. There's the surface low. Usually want to target the front right quadrant of a landfalling tropical cyclone when it comes inland. And with this system, the spin is so weak that even the storm relative helicity, even the wind shear in the front right quadrant, is marginally supportive of tornadoes at about 150 to 200, 0 to 1 kilometer shear. And interestingly, there is a lot of cape up there coming ashore. All that dry air coming in aloft is making for some steep lapse rates. So if we do get any convection there developing on the north side of the center, I do think that there is a non-zero chance of a tornado threat. And there it is over the Augusta area, late night tonight. About 4Z is going to be arriving pretty close to the Augusta area, so could be some heavy rainfall up there, maybe some gusty winds as the system continues to weaken dramatically coming ashore. Not much in the way of even flooding rainfall. The main impact is going to be that coastal flooding with this system. But off of the Pacific Northwest, I'm still monitoring this big-time heat wave up there. Look at some of these temperatures down in Portland, Salem, Oregon. Portland at 114, which I believe is an all-time record for Portland here. Buck 16 down in Salem, Oregon, just a little bit to the south. 117, a little bit inland. Just incredible heat out there. A little bit of some modification by the Pacific right along the immediate shoreline, but then you go a little bit inland. Even portions of the Olympic Peninsula there with that offshore flow right along the coast. 109 in the Olympic Peninsula there. Incredible heat happening. Seattle's at 105. I'm sure that people aren't used to this type of heat. It includes southern Alberta as well. Even up into Calgary, up there about 104. I know Mark is working on the Dominator weather stations up in Alberta right now, so he's definitely feeling the heat. And this is a big ridge, and then there's a trough over eastern Colorado, so that's why temperatures are so cool here in Colorado following our big-time heat approaching triple digits in Denver during the week prior. This is a different thermal ridge out here in the northwest that is just dominating. Look at some of these temperatures throughout Oregon, even northern California. Mount Shasta area are pushing the triple digits. So very high temperatures out there in the Pacific Northwest. Let me slide this a little bit off to the right so that you can actually see the obs. There they are. Portland, 114 over 53. Just up the road from Portland, 109 over 73. That seems like a bit of a high dew point. But there are some pockets of decent moisture up here as well. So it's not just a dry heat, but it is also quite humid out here across the Pacific Northwest. Just incredible heat out here. 117, just a little bit to the east of Portland. Big time heat. Seattle, you're over 105 right now. 110, just on the other side of the sound. Olympic Peninsula, temperature, triple digit heat across portions of the Olympic Peninsula. And the southern side, there at Vancouver Island, triple digit heat as well up there. So what's responsible for this heat in the Pacific Northwest? Northwest, you may ask. And it's a big time ridge. Look at this massive anticyclone over the Pacific Northwest. On the east side of the anticyclone, you have this positively tilted trough that extends back into Colorado, northern and eastern Colorado. That's where we're getting those cooler temperatures, almost like a polar vortex breaking event. You're getting a lot more of that cool air coming down from Canada. Definitely a breather out here, and the Colorado foothills have a lot of moisture. But this is a big-time anticyclone across the northwest, Pacific Northwest. Look at that thing just dominating out there. 594 ridge. You got a little trough here coming in to the eastern Pacific. A lot of warm advection ahead of that trough has led to a big-time anticyclonic wave-breaking event here, becoming a closed anticyclone aloft. Look at those temperatures. And NAM did a pretty good job with forecasting these daytime highs. About 104, 105 up there in Seattle. A little bit hotter down into Portland. So hopefully everybody's able to stay cool with the AC out here. Look at the heat in interior Washington as forecast. You definitely could see a couple 115, 117s out there, as well as around Portland. Extreme heat out there. Wow. Big time anticyclone, closed anticyclone aloft. That's responsible for this. Some areas of descending air as well that's helping to increase those temperatures. Even up in the higher peaks of the Cascades are going to be pushing 90 up there, interior Washington as well. Big time heat. And let's see how long it's going to continue. Tomorrow, you get a little bit of a breather. Tuesday, across the coastal areas to the west of the Cascades. The big time heat, though, continues just to the east of the Cascades. You're starting to get the influence of that upper low to the west of this anticyclone here along coastal Washington and Oregon there, helping to moderate those temperatures during the day on Tuesday. But even hotter across interior Washington tomorrow than it was today, if you can believe it or not. Possibly even pushing 120 out there in interior Washington. And again on Wednesday, that extreme heat continues across interior Washington and Oregon, northern Idaho as well, into southern Alberta. Big heat dome happening here. A little bit of a moderating effect right along the immediate coastline, just to the west of the Cascades. Quite a bit of moisture coming in off the Pacific there. But it continues to be relatively dry and hot to the east of the Cascades, descending air. Tuesday. The heat continues on Thursday in interior Washington as well. Still triple-digit heat, well into the triple digits there. And that heat begins to expand across the rest of the northern Rockies as well by the end of the week. Starting to get temperatures well into the 90s, even pushing triple digits there across northern portions of Montana. So it looks like today could be the last day of big time heat from the Cascades off to the west across western Washington and Oregon. But the heat's forecast to continue through the end of the week across interior Washington. We're a little bit more used to that heat, but this is on Saturday. Still pushing 110 out here, interior Washington. You start to get hot again on Saturday here. Places like Seattle, Portland, well into the 90s once again. Through the weekend, you're going to see triple-digit heat continuing in interior Washington. And then early next week, we start to see a little bit of a moderating factor, and bam! Looks like by Tuesday, it gets a lot cooler across the entire Pacific Northwest. So you're going to have to grind through this weekend across interior Washington and Oregon into early next week. And then early next week, about Tuesday, things start to moderate as we get a big-time pattern shift here across the country. Could signify the beginning of some severe weather finally. That massive anticyclone in the Pacific Northwest is generally not that favorable for severe weather, but you can see this pattern shift as a trough finally begins to erode that mega anticyclone that's currently dominating the Pacific Northwest. This signifies a bit of a pattern shift as we're going through the early portion of July. If this jet can remain in the northern U.S., and we could get some high plains insanity type setups across Montana and the Dakotas up here middle portion of next week with an active consolidated northern branch of the jet. Nice upper level low coming into northern California here in the Pacific Northwest. the end of next week, but we're starting to get into fantasy land here now. I could see a pretty active monsoon shaping up here with that anticyclone settling in toward the Four Corners. This upper level low coming into California. I could see a nice moisture surge into the southwestern U.S., the middle to later portion of next week as well, on the west side of this anticyclone and to the east of this upper level low. Have to keep an eye on that as well for some chasing potential. Maybe some northwest flow up into the Dakotas as well. There you can see that moisture surge up the Sea of Cortez into southern Arizona. That's like July 6th, 7th, and 8th, but we're way out in fantasy land now. So no reason to get amped yet about that. But really the stories right now, Tropical Storm Danny making landfall. The heat dome as well in the Pacific Northwest with those temperatures. $114 there in Portland. 105 right now in Seattle. And all of that is because this massive closed 594 plus decameter anticyclone. There you can see that little upper level low too. Warm advection ahead of that is helping to proliferate that ridge. And it looks like by Tuesday you start to get some influence of that upper level low along coastal Washington and Oregon. So you should get a little bit of a break there, Seattle to Portland. But notice how this anticyclone shifts to the north across southern Canada, central southern Saskatchewan. The heat is going to come with it. So Wednesday, very hot day, continues up into central southern Alberta. Start to get some maritime influence here though. Wednesday as well across coastal Washington there. Moisture increases to the west of the Cascades, but that heat continues. Eastern Washington, interior Washington, and Oregon continues through this week. Finally though, the anticyclone lifts out. This is by Thursday. That anticyclone there over the central Canadian prairies. A little bit of some onshore flow, but the heat's going to continue across interior Washington, interior Oregon there. Relatively cool across the Great Lakes through the end of the week. Get a little positively tilted trough action up there. Look at this heat across central Canada. Even pushing 100 degrees across portions of the boreal forest there. Northern Saskatchewan, northern Manitoba to the north of Lakes Winnipeg. Lake Manitoba. Triple digit heat up there across the tundra. Polar bear country up there. You're even going to be pushing triple digits right along the immediate, close to the immediate shoreline of Hudson Bay. Of course it does, the water temperatures are incredibly cold there. Probably still some ice cover across northern Hudson Bay as well, right along the immediate shoreline. Temperatures are moderated, but just inland then, you're pushing 90s, pushing triple digits there across northern portions of Manitoba, northern Saskatchewan. Then you start to get a cold front over the weekend. It's going to help bring some relief up there as well. So definitely an interesting pattern with all that extreme heat that we have going on. Tropical Storm Danny, as of the 5 p.m. advisory, was just offshore there. That track that I was showing on the Radar Omega app was from that old advisory. And there is that stationary rain band starting to pivot a little bit north into the Hilton Head area. Starting to get some dry air shutting off that rain in the Savannah area. So before any flash flood warnings are issued, that dry air, continental air, is coming in along the southwest side of that circulation, shutting off precipitation there near Savannah. A little bit of a feeder band now as that center is coming in. This is starting to pivot a bit back around. You've got northeasterly winds coming into that convergent band that is lifted just to the north of the Savannah area. But look at this, to the north of the system, completely dry out there. In fact, you got about 4,000 Cape according to the RAP analysis right now, just offshore. But so much subsidence, so much dry air coming in that you can't even get any convection. Just these little wispy showers and squalls that will come through. No deep convection, nothing sufficient to generate a tornado threat within this area. Some onshore flow, though, for the tropical storm warning area and the very flood-prone Charleston area. Could get some coastal flooding, storm surge during high tide, approaching about 2 feet, if that. But this is definitely a low end, about as low end as they can get for a tropical storm. But you can definitely see that broad cyclonic spin with this system as it's coming ashore. So I'm going to be pivoting toward the tropics, but also northern high plains season in July. I'm hoping to get down to the southwestern U.S. to work some of this monsoon. I think it's going to be a very active monsoon year, and it's been a while since we've had big haboobs down there in southern Arizona, so I'll be on haboob mode as well, getting my drone up along the leading edge of those haboobs. Maybe be working some debris plugs with my friend David Rankin out there as well, who is trying to track down asteroids that could be a potential threat to planet Earth. He works at that observatory down in Tucson right now, but he's the one that specializes in chasing those flash floods in the desert Southwest, growing up in the Big Water, Utah area. I was fortunate enough to tag along with David during the 2018 monsoon. He helped us intercept numerous debris plugs and flash floods that are coming off of the Grand Staircase of Utah. It's basically like a semi-permanent dry line that sits over the Texas Panhandle, just firing round after round after round of supercells. The Grand Staircase is a gently upward sloping topography in far southern Utah, basically like a staircase that goes all the way up, and you get a little bit of moisture coming in from the south, and every single day, like clockwork, you get these very moist, precipitation-laden storms that will fire. They dump all their rain, often further north, and then hours later, those potentially deadly debris plugs will come ripping down these dry creek beds, dry washes, slot canyons. They can definitely pose a risk to your life as a hiker down there within those areas. But hoping to get back on the saddle there and start intercepting those debris plugs as well in the desert Southwest with an active monsoon season ahead. But of course, I am watching the tropical season out here in the Atlantic. Year 2 La Nina coming in. A lot of warm water in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean and the southwestern Atlantic and the western Atlantic, western tropical and subtropical Atlantic. So really, it just depends on how far west the extension is of that Bermuda High, if those storms will head into the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, or if they're going to recurve and be predominantly fish storms. So still an above average season expected there for hurricanes, named storms. Not as active as last year, but that's a pretty easy prediction to make since last year was such a record-breaking hurricane season, especially for portions of the Gulf Coast. So thank you everybody for joining me for this weather report. Breaking down Tropical Storm Danny. I think you could get a little bit in Augusta, Georgia, but looking at how this rain band is drying out and also pivoting a bit, I think that there is going to be a period of heavy rain, but not enough to cause any flooding as the system lifts off to the west-northwest. You'd really have to get unlucky to have one of those really heavy rain-producing storms just to park over your area. But thank you for joining me for this weather report. I'm going to continue to do daily weather reports, weather briefings as we go through the heart of the summer here. And thank you guys for joining me. Dominate the storm.